Hello and welcome to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box. Now, today we're going to talk about comedians battling it out over music and who is right. In the blue corner, there's George Carlin, who said that white people should never play the blues, that it's their job to give people the blues, and that he hates it when a white actor opens up a blues club, gets on stage, and starts blowing into a harmonica. No guesses about who he might be referring to there, because Dan Aykroyd of the Blues Brothers fits that bill, right down to being a harmonica player. On the other hand, are what Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi, the late John Belushi, have said themselves about their creation, the Blues Brothers, and its relationship to authenticity, its relationship to musical culture, its relationship to black culture, its relationship to Americana, and the line between acting and authentic music making, because all of these things were blurred and challenged with the Blues Brothers. And it's been something that I've thought of a lot. Now, I told you what Carlin said. Here's what Aykroyd and Belushi said. Belushi has always said that he, in his lifetime, a far too short lifetime, that he absolutely loved the music and that everything he was doing was an homage or a homage, if you will, to these great musicians. Dan Aykroyd, who was the sort of more studious of the two, although they were both very much dedicated to the music, he is defended against these accusations, these Carlin style accusations, saying several things. One, the musicians were paid very, well, not, I wouldn't say, well, not very well, but they were paid the market rate for their published for their songs, for their compositions. In other words, there wasn't an attempt by Aykroyd, the director, or the film company, to say, look, just sign away all your rights for, some pocket change and screw you. No, these musicians benefit every time this film is streamed or shown cinematically, or when in the days when television mattered on television, etc. So there was that argument. The other argument Aykroyd made is that look at how many people love Eric Clapton, the archetype, if you will, of a white guy who loved to play the blues and still does. And the third argument that Aykroyd made is that this film helped to give a lot of musicians whose fortunes were in different places in the late 70s, early 80s, it helped give them a shot of publicity and bring them back into the limelight. And to be objective, most of the musicians featured in the film and most of the songs featured in the film, they did receive a second life, and the artists and the composers who needed it, they really got it. And because the film has become such a repeatedly shown cult classic, a lot of these artists kept riding a wave of notoriety post Blues Brothers, where they were dipping in their fortunes, in some cases, not all, before the Blues Brothers. So at the end of the day, what do we think? Well, I think that anytime Hollywood can showcase authentic music, music that wasn't written for the film, music that isn't library music, whenever they can say, right, this is a film about music, and we are going to talk about the musicians by name, we are going to show them, we're going to feature many of them in the film, I think that can only be a good thing. I think really the problem that Carlin was pointing out, even though he was clearly referencing Aykroyd, and I love Carlin, I love Aykroyd, I love John Belushi, I think they're all really talented. I think the problem is more of copycats, because when you do something once, it's authentic. When other people then try to jump on the bandwagon, that's when it becomes a bit cringe. But the Blues Brothers themselves, they really were coming out of left field, because again, blues and traditional rhythm and blues weren't all that popular in the late 70s. You had derivatives of these styles that were super popular. Funk, disco, contemporary soul, the comings of electrofunk in the very early 80s. But your traditional sort of Sam and Dave, Booker T and the MGs, the gospel era of Aretha Franklin, and even sort of the classic Ray Charles compositions, it wasn't on the radio as much in the late 70s. Barry White was on the radio, Isaac Hayes was on the radio, Diana Ross was on the radio, Gloria Gaynor was on the radio, Do the Hustle was on the radio, the Bee Gees, White Disco on the radio. And so they decided to purposefully inject early 60s, well, mid 60s and before. So music going back to the roots of blues and ending in the mid to late 60s and nothing after. They re-injected this music into the popular mainstream by creating this incredibly surreal, totally different movie that by all sort of clinical and objective estimates should not have done very well, but it made a huge profit comparatively, became an instant classic and later on a cult classic. I think that's been good for exposing this music to audiences that wouldn't have otherwise necessarily discovered it for themselves. And for that alone, all else can be forgiven. That's what I think, at least. I happen to love the movie and really love what they did with it. At the same time, I can totally see what George Carlin means. Let me know where you fall on this or if you can see both sides as well. And as always, like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Take care.